The steady hum of the hospital machines filled the room with a cruel kind of rhythm, one that measured not just Thomas's heartbeat, but the dwindling thread of time that held him between life and death. The sterile white walls felt almost funereal, trapping everyone in the unbearable quiet of waiting. The scent of antiseptic clung to the air, but beneath it lingered the sharper odor of fear. Hope sat beside Thomas's bed, her fingers clutching his hand as if her grip alone could anchor him to the world. His face, once full of vitality and brilliance, now looked ghostly beneath the fluorescent light. The tumor had taken more from him than anyone dared to admit. His thoughts had grown cloudy, his words disjointed, and now his body was beginning to surrender. Each breath he took sounded like a confession. The doctors had run every test, every treatment known to medicine. There had been moments of optimism, fleeting bursts of belief that a new therapy might turn the tide, but each had ended in quiet disappointment. It was Finn who delivered the final blow of truth. "There's only one way left," he said, his tone heavy with the weight of professional duty and personal anguish. "There's an antibody, extremely rare. It's only found in a small fraction of the population. If we can find a donor match, he might have a chance." The words might have echoed in the room like a fragile promise. Steffi stood by the window, staring out at the night skyline of Los Angeles. She could barely breathe. Her brother, the man she had spent half her life fighting with and protecting in equal measure, was slipping away. All her power, her wealth, her influence, none of it meant anything now. Hope's sobs broke the silence, but Steffi didn't turn. Her own tears refused to fall. She had to stay strong, if only to stop herself from falling apart. "Find the donor," she said finally, her voice trembling with a desperate resolve. "Whatever it takes. Whoever it is." The hospital's genetic database was scoured. Hours turned into days. Finn coordinated with labs across the country, each test returning the same cruel answer: no match. The news spread through the family like a sickness. Ridge grew hollow with guilt, his mind replaying every fight, every harsh word he had ever thrown at his son. Brooke stood beside him, torn between comforting him and crumbling herself. Even Taylor, who had kept her distance from the chaos of Los Angeles, was flown in, her face a mask of controlled agony. "He doesn't deserve this," she whispered, and no one dared to respond. By the third night, hope had begun to erode. The doctors were preparing to withdraw Thomas from aggressive treatment. Hope refused to leave his side, her fingers brushing his hair as she whispered stories about their son, about the future she had once imagined, the one that now seemed to belong to another lifetime. Finn was about to suggest sedation when a nurse entered, breathless, holding a file. "Dr. Finnegan," she said, her voice trembling, "we have a positive match." Every head in the room turned. For a moment, no one dared to speak. The nurse's eyes darted nervously between them before she handed over the file. Finn scanned the papers, his brow furrowing in disbelief. "This can't be right," he muttered. "The compatibility index is perfect. It's unprecedented." Hope rose to her feet, her voice shaking. "Who is it?" Before he could answer, a shadow filled the doorway. The air shifted, heavy and electric. A woman stood there, her presence as jarring as a gunshot in a cathedral. Her lips curved into a faint, almost mournful smile. "I think you already know," she said. The room froze. It was Sheila Carter. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The sound of the monitors, the soft hiss of oxygen, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, all faded beneath the collective disbelief. Hope's face went pale. Steffi's eyes flared with fury, and Ridge could only stare, as if seeing a ghost crawl out of the past. "You," Steffi spat, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sheila took a step forward, her eyes not leaving Thomas's unconscious form. "I'm here because he's dying," she said quietly. "And because I'm the only one who can save him." Ridge lunged forward, his fury barely restrained. "You expect us to believe that?" Finn's voice was tight, professional, but there was unease beneath it. "Her results are a perfect match. The antibodies we need, they're found in her blood. Steffi's stomach turned.
No.
No, there's no way. How would that even be possible? Sheila looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time there was something almost human in her eyes. Because I'm his mother. The words landed like shrapnel. The silence that followed was suffocating. Hope's knees gave way, and she collapsed into the chair beside Thomas's bed. Steffi shook her head, disbelief curdling into rage. You're lying, she hissed. You're sick, Sheila. You'll say anything to get what you want. But Finn, his mind racing through the data, the blood work, the genetic markers, he knew. The numbers didn't lie. She's telling the truth, he said softly, his voice cracking under the weight of it. Her DNA matches. There's no other explanation. Ridge stumbled backward, his hand pressed to his mouth. No, he muttered. No, it can't be. Taylor is his mother. Taylor raised him. She did, Sheila said, her voice trembling now, no longer the predator, but the ghost of one. And she did it well. But there are things Ridge never knew. Things that were taken from me and from him decades ago. The past she spoke of unfolded in fragments, each word pulling the room deeper into the pit of disbelief. Years earlier, during one of Sheila's many descents into chaos, she had an affair that she had buried along with every trace of her humanity. A child had been born under false names and secret circumstances, switched at birth, passed into Taylor's care after Sheila had been institutionalized. The official records had been sealed, falsified by a doctor who owed Sheila his silence. I was told he died, she said, her eyes glistening. I lived with that lie for years. Until now. Hope felt her entire world tilt. The man she loved, the father of her child, was bound by blood to the woman who had nearly destroyed them all. Every terrible thing Sheila had done, every life she had shattered, now tangled itself into the veins of the man lying helpless before them. No, Hope whispered, tears streaking her face. This can't be real. Steffi's fury broke through her grief. You don't get to come here and rewrite history, Sheila. You don't get to claim him just because your blood can fix what your hands destroyed. But Finn, trapped between his duty as a doctor and his horror as a son-in-law, knew the truth none of them wanted to face. Without her antibodies, Thomas will die. The words hung in the air like a sentence. No one spoke. No one moved. Ridge turned toward Sheila, hatred and desperation warring in his eyes. If you're lying, I'm not, she said softly. And if you want him to live, you'll have to let me help. The procedure that followed was as tense as any battle. Sheila underwent the transfusion under strict supervision, every step monitored, every precaution taken to ensure she couldn't manipulate the situation. Yet through it all, she never flinched, never gloated. Her silence unnerved them more than her words ever could. When the transfusion began, Finn watched the monitors closely, his hands steady even as his heart threatened to unravel. Slowly, Thomas's vitals began to improve. The irregular spikes smoothed into rhythm, his breathing steadied, and the faint color began to return to his cheeks. Hope wept openly, clutching his hand. You're going to make it, she whispered, though her voice trembled with the uncertainty of it. Steffi stood frozen, unable to reconcile the horror of what she was witnessing with the miracle unfolding before her eyes. When it was done, Sheila slumped against the bed, pale but strangely serene. She looked at Thomas, her eyes soft with something almost maternal. You have no idea, she whispered, how long I've waited to see you breathe. Ridge couldn't bear it. He turned away, his shoulders shaking. You should have stayed dead, he said under his breath, the words filled not with rage but sorrow. Days passed. Thomas stabilized, but the damage done to the family was irreparable. News of Sheila's heroism spread like wildfire, twisted by tabloids into a grotesque redemption story. Hope couldn't sleep. Every time she looked at Thomas, she saw the shadow of Sheila behind him, the blood that now bound them all. Finn avoided his mother entirely, burying himself in his work to numb the guilt that her survival now carried. Deacon, meanwhile, found himself at the center of a storm he couldn't escape. He had known more than he'd admitted. Years ago, Sheila had come to him in one of her lucid, broken states, confessing the existence of a child she'd lost. He had dismissed it as madness, another of her fabrications. Now, as the truth stood naked before him, he felt the full weight of his silence. Hope confronted him, her eyes hollow. "You knew," she demanded. "You knew she might be his mother, and you said nothing?" Deacon's voice cracked as he tried to explain. "I didn't believe her, Hope. I didn't want to believe her. I thought she was trying to drag us all down again. But the damage was done." Ridge's trust in everyone around him fractured completely. The man who had built his life on image, on control, was left powerless before the one truth he could not reshape. His son carried the blood of his greatest enemy. Taylor withdrew into silence, devastated by the revelation that the child she had loved and raised was never truly hers by birth, though he would always be hers in heart. When Thomas finally awoke, the world he returned to was unrecognizable. The faces that surrounded him were tear-stained and hollow, their smiles brittle. Hope's relief dissolved into conflict as she tried to reconcile her love for him with the truth of his lineage. "You didn't do anything wrong," she told him through tears, "but I don't know how to live with this." Thomas listened, his mind fogged by painkillers and shock. When Finn finally told him everything, he didn't speak for a long time. "Sheila," he murmured finally, the name tasting like poison. "My mother." His voice broke on the last word. "Then what does that make me?" Finn's eyes softened. "It makes you Thomas, the man who survived." But Thomas couldn't accept it. In the weeks that followed, he spiraled between gratitude and revulsion, haunted by the idea that the same blood that had saved him had destroyed so many others. He dreamed of her, her eyes, her voice, her madness, and each time he woke, he felt her shadow crawling through his veins. Sheila, for her part, disappeared shortly after the procedure. Some said she fled the city. Others whispered she was watching, waiting, her redemption incomplete. But for Ridge, Steffi, and Hope, her absence was almost worse than her presence. Because now she lived within them, not in body, but in legacy. And Thomas, standing beneath the gray sky outside the hospital weeks later, finally understood the cruel irony of his survival. Life had spared him, but not to free him. It had spared him to remind them all that no matter how far they ran from the past, the blood they carried would always find its way home. The revelation spread through Los Angeles like wildfire, whispered at first in disbelief, then shouted in boardrooms, salons, and the corridors of Forrester Creations. Sheila Carter was Thomas Forrester's biological mother. It was a truth so toxic, so unimaginable, that it fractured everything it touched. The Forrester family, already reeling from Thomas's near-death and miraculous recovery, now found themselves staring into a mirror of betrayal that distorted their own reflections. And somewhere in the shadows of this chaos stood Deacon Sharp, the man who knew more than he had ever dared to admit. Deacon had lived his entire life navigating the thin line between truth and survival. For years, he had clawed his way out of the darkness that Sheila Carter had dragged him into. Her chaos, her obsession, her unpredictable love that burned like gasoline. But even after she vanished, a part of her had stayed with him, haunting his conscience, whispering secrets in his sleep. One of those secrets had been the existence of a child, long lost, long buried. At the time, he had dismissed it as another delusion from a woman who thrived on confusion. He hadn't wanted to believe that Sheila was capable of keeping something so monumental hidden from the world, or that he was capable of helping her do it. But now, as the truth crashed into daylight, he was forced to face the reality that his silence had protected her, and that protection had cost him everything. Hope had been the first to confront him. She arrived at his apartment in the middle of the night, eyes wild, her usually gentle voice sharp with betrayal. "Tell me it's not true," she demanded, her words trembling. "Tell me you didn't know." Deacon, standing by the window with a glass of bourbon in his hand, didn't answer immediately. The city lights shimmered below, indifferent to the destruction unfolding in his living room. "Hope," he began, his tone heavy. "There are things you don't understand." Her response was swift and brutal. "Don't you dare say that to me. You always say that when you're guilty." Her voice cracked. "You knew, didn't you? You knew she was Thomas's mother, and you said nothing." Deacon's silence was an admission in itself. He turned away, his shoulders heavy with a shame he could no longer outrun. "I didn't know," he said finally. "Not for certain. But I suspected." That single sentence shattered the fragile line between them. Hope's breath caught in her throat, her eyes filling with tears that burned hotter than anger. "You suspected?" she repeated. "And you didn't think to tell anyone?" "Not me, not Finn, not Ridge, not even Taylor." Her voice broke completely. "You let them mourn a lie, you let Thomas almost die without knowing, and you let her, that woman, walk around free while you carried her secret." Deacon took a step toward her, his hands raised, his voice trembling. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" she shot back. "From the truth? Or from yourself?" The accusation hit its mark. He had told himself for months that his silence was noble, that he was shielding his daughter from the ugliness of Sheila's world. But deep down, he knew it had also been cowardice. He hadn't wanted to be the man who exposed the secret that could destroy everyone he loved. He hadn't wanted to face the rage of Ridge Forrester, the contempt of Brooke, or the disappointment in Hope's eyes. So he had chosen to stay quiet, hoping that the truth would die with the woman who had created it. But Sheila had never been the kind of monster to die quietly. The confrontation between Hope and Deacon left them both hollow. When she finally walked out, her parting words cut him deeper than any wound he had ever endured. "You're not just my father anymore, Deacon. You're her accomplice." He stood in the silence that followed, the sound of the door slamming echoing like a verdict. For hours, he didn't move. The bourbon on the table went untouched, his reflection in the glass dark and unfamiliar. The man who looked back at him wasn't the father who had fought to prove himself, nor the lover who had believed he could redeem a woman like Sheila. He was something else, something smaller. A man stripped of the illusion that his silence had meaning. But the reckoning wasn't over. The next morning, Taylor arrived at his door. Her presence carried a different kind of fury, colder, quieter, the kind that could kill without raising its voice. She had always been composed, her strength rooted in restraint, but now there was a tremor beneath her calm that betrayed the depth of her hurt. "I need to hear it from you," she said as soon as he opened the door. "Did you know?" Deacon didn't bother with pretense this time. "I didn't know for sure," he said. "But I suspected. I should have said something. I didn't." Taylor's lips parted slightly, disbelief flickering across her face. "You suspected that Sheila Carter, the woman who's terrorized this family for years, was the biological mother of my son, and you stayed silent." Her voice wavered on the last word, not out of weakness, but heartbreak. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Deacon stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in, but she didn't move. "Taylor, listen to me. You know how dangerous she is. You know what she's capable of. I thought if I said anything, she'd find a way to use it, to hurt people again. To hurt you." Taylor's composure cracked. "She already has. She's hurt everyone. And now I find out that the man who claimed to have turned his life around, who said he wanted to be better for his daughter, has been helping her all along." Her words hit harder than Hope's. Because Taylor, unlike Hope, knew what it meant to protect someone out of love and fear. She had spent years doing it for Ridge, for her children, for herself. But she also knew the cost of silence, the way secrets festered until they poisoned everything around them. "You think keeping that secret saved us?" she said, her voice sharp with emotion. "It killed us. It killed Thomas's trust. It destroyed whatever peace this family had left, and it broke my son in ways you'll never understand." Deacon's jaw tightened, his eyes clouding with remorse. "I didn't want to be the one to light that fire." "You didn't light it," she snapped. "You just watched it burn." The weight of her disappointment settled like ash in the room. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Taylor's voice softened, barely more than a whisper. "You loved her, didn't you? Deacon didn't answer, but the truth was written all over his face. Taylor nodded slowly, the pain in her expression giving way to resignation. You loved her enough to lose everyone else. When she left, she didn't slam the door the way Hope had. She simply walked away, leaving the faint echo of her footsteps to fill the silence. Deacon sank into the nearest chair, his hands trembling as he covered his face. The apartment felt emptier than it ever had. The walls seemed to close in, thick with the ghosts of choices he couldn't undo. In the days that followed, the fallout deepened. The Forrestas cut ties with him completely. Brooke forbade Hope from visiting her father, though Hope ignored her, torn between rage and lingering compassion. Ridge confronted him once, in the alley behind Il Giardino, the restaurant where so many of their lives had collided over the years. Ridge's anger was quiet but lethal. You had the chance to protect this family, he said, his voice cold. Instead, you chose her. Don't ever come near any of us again. Deacon didn't argue. He knew there was no defense left. He had played the role of both savior and coward, and now he was left with nothing but the wreckage of his choices. Nights became longer, haunted by memories of Sheila. The way she laughed, the way she loved, the way she could make him feel invincible one moment and damned the next. He remembered the night she told him about the baby she had lost. Her voice had been fragile, stripped of the usual venom. He was my light, she had said. And they took him from me. At the time, he had thought it was another fabrication. Now he realized it had been her one moment of truth, and he had ignored it. One evening, weeks after everything unraveled, Hope returned. She stood in his doorway, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. I shouldn't be here, she said quietly. But I can't stop thinking about it. Deacon looked at her, his heart aching with a love that could no longer protect her. About what? About how you've spent your whole life trying to do the right thing, and always choosing the wrong way to do it. Her voice was soft but laced with pain. I want to hate you, Dad. I really do. But I can't. Because every time I look at you, I see the same thing I saw in Sheila, the part that wanted to be better, even when the world wouldn't let you. He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Sheila didn't want to be better, Hope. She just wanted to win. Maybe, Hope said. But you loved her anyway. Her words lingered long after she left. Love, it had been the root of everything. His love for Sheila, twisted and forbidden. His love for Hope, pure but powerless. His love for redemption, always just out of reach. He realized then that love had been both his salvation and his curse. It had made him human, but it had also made him weak. In the weeks that followed, Deacon disappeared from the public eye. Il Giardino was sold to new management, the apartment emptied. No one knew where he went. Some said he left town to start over, others that he was still in Los Angeles, living quietly, paying his penance in solitude. But every so often, people whispered about seeing him near the cliffs overlooking the Pacific, staring out at the ocean as if searching for forgiveness in the endless horizon. Hope never spoke of him again, though sometimes, when the wind rustled through the trees outside her home, she thought she could hear his voice in the distance, a reminder that redemption was never clean, that love could be both poison and cure. Taylor, too, found herself haunted by him, not with anger but with understanding. They were, after all, two people who had spent their lives trying to heal the broken and failing to fix themselves. As for Deacon, he carried the weight of his silence until the end. He had loved a woman who destroyed everything she touched, and in trying to protect the world from her, he had become part of her story. The world would remember him as the man who kept Sheila Carter's secret, the man who betrayed his family, the man who lost his daughter's trust. But in the quiet corners of his soul, he knew the truth. He had acted out of love. Misguided, desperate, human love. And maybe, just maybe, that was punishment enough.